One way we understand this is through the well-known case study of Phineas Gage. And many of you have heard of Phineas Gage. He was a railroad worker in Vermont who had a pole blown under his cheek out the top of his head. It landed about 30 yards away. And I'm from New England. So I think I know what he said. He did not lose consciousness. He didn't lose consciousness. Didn't fall down. He was standing there. And I think he probably said, geez. But I wasn't there, so I don't know for sure. But he's from Vermont, so that's probably what he said. But anyway, they took him over to Dartmouth-Hitchcock, and they patched up his head, and they patched up his cheek, and they sent him home, and he was fine. Totally fine. Well, except for he developed what we would call clinically, he became a total jerk. He started going out to bars. He started getting in fights. He became impulsive. He made rash decisions. He became argumentative. He used to be the manager of his crew and no longer showed up on time. It was petulant and difficult. And I don't know if that reminds you of any other group of people, but you might see a similarity or two. Quick to argue, impulsive, difficult. But there's an important difference. And this is a very important difference. And this is if there's one takeaway here, this might be it. There's a difference between brain damage in adults and works in progress. I love teenagers. They're not done. They are not done yet. And that's part of why I love them, because there's still a lot of work to be done, and we can be part of the good part of that work. Phineas Gage is an excellent example because he gave us a hint about where we might want to look in terms of adolescent development. And he turned out to be right. The parts of the brain that are developing, when they're under construction, they can look a little bit like Phineas Gage. But until we appreciate that this is a work in progress, that things are still evolving, we're not using that information properly. So I've just thrown a whole bunch of neuroscience at you. Let me put it into context for you. So here's a brain, and you know it's a brain because there are eyes in the front. That's how you can tell. And you can see that frontal cortex, the amygdala is down deep. I have to put the thalamus up in there. Please don't worry about it. It's just in case there is a neurologist or any doctor in the room and be like, well, actually, no, okay. So, but we don't really, well, of course we care, but we don't really care about the thalamus. So let's say this afternoon you're getting ready to come to this amazing event. And you thought, I'm just going to get 1 cup of coffee before the event starts, just to perk myself up. Go into your kitchen. You approach your coffee maker, and between you and the coffee maker, you run into the rock group KISS. Now, for some of you, this may be a problem. What happens? Well, your eyes see this information, and the thalamus, which is a relay, has to send a rough copy to your amygdala, your burglar alarm, to see if anything needs to be done. The amygdala is going to sound the burglar alarm. Oh, God, all right, we got to do something about this. And now, I know people from Texas. Gene Simmons is not going to stop you from getting a cup of coffee. So you immediately start to prepare your roundhouse kick to take him out. And in the meantime, the thalamus is relaying that information back to the visual system, where it gets processed with more detail. And just as you're about to land the fatal blow, information gets sent to the frontal cortex, the conductor, who says, hold on, I'm getting more information from visual, getting some information from visual. You know what? That's not a real person. That's a poster. You're tired, and you need to take it down a notch. And the frontal lobe can tell the amygdala to quiet down. Now, I like to use this example because this has happened to most of you. Or not. Ever. Not even close. I like to use this example because it's pretty silly, because the ones that you have experienced aren't super fun to think about. If any of you almost had a car wreck, but not quite, and have found yourself with your legs shaking and your heart racing, and you had to literally sometimes pull over and talk yourself down, tell your body that it's okay, tell yourself that everything's fine, that it's going to be fine, and add information to that bodily sensation. That's a really important process. What if this system isn't mature yet? What if you had that huge experience you have when you almost have a car wreck, but your frontal lobes aren't totally coordinated yet? So your body has this big response that your brain does recognize, but your frontal lobes don't have that ability to make it. It's supposed to relax, calm down. That leaves us in an interesting spot when it comes to teenagers. Now keep this in mind as I tell you about one of my favorite studies in neuroscience, done by a colleague of mine, Elizabeth Phelps. She had people come into her laboratory, and she studies the amygdala and fear conditioning. And she had people come in And her premise was, and I think this is a safe premise, are any of you afraid of blue squares? Anyone? Blue squares don't generally frighten people. So she says to people, she had people tape an electrode onto their hand, and she had them actually choose a level of shock, a little jolt. Because as psychologists, we shock everyone. That's part, any study involves a shock. But what she said to them was, pick a level of shock that's aversive but not painful. Aversive but not painful. And then I'm going to put you in the MRI, which is a way that we measure brain activity. And she said, I'm going to show you hundreds of shapes, lots of different colors. If you see a blue square, I'm going to shock you. Any other shape, no problem. Red square, not a threat. Blue circle, not a threat. Any other shape, nothing's going to happen. But if you see a blue square, I'm going to shock you. Puts them in the MRI, shows them hundreds of shapes, including blue squares. Here's the manipulation that was brilliant. No shocks. Not a single shock. No shocks are delivered. And she takes them out, and she looked at all the moments in time where their brain saw blue squares relative to all these other shapes. Now, none of these people had had any negative experience with blue squares, no reason to fear blue squares. And even in the setup of the experiment, they did pick shock, but not while looking at a blue square. No experience with blue squares and shocks hurting them. But as you can see, maybe I can do it on my computer here because I can't point at those screens. If you see that little guy there, that's the amygdala going gangbusters whenever people saw blue squares, even though they'd never been hurt by a blue square. Who told? Who gave this experience? So you've never had the experience, but your burglar alarm trips to a blue square? Why? Well, the frontal lobe told it. The frontal lobe told it to. The thinking part of your brain, the mature part of your brain said, hey, look, there might be a problem. This is what, burglar alarm, this is what I want you to be attuned to. And it so did. If I said behind this door, there is a terrifying monster, there are at least 3 men in the room that would have to go look anyway, so that's just that. But most of you would not have to. You would feel fearful because of the information, because you can abstract about that, you can think about that, you can understand what could happen to you, and it would trip your burglar alarm.